Yeah, thanks very much for inviting me to Tallinn. It's a great thing because I'm here for the third time, and the first time was about 15 years ago, and the city has so much changed. It's always thrilling to come here. Last year I was here again with my father. We did a trip through the Baltic countries and started in Tallinn, also every time good, and I was amazed how much everything changed, but also how much things were still there. And I was here 15 years ago, invited by a friend, Thomas Tamis, who I was studying with in London. And he told me that the lecture might be important, but he especially introduced me into Estonian culture a little bit at nighttime. So yeah, today I'm here again, very happy, because I made it. Life is killing us sometimes. I wanted to be here for the whole conference and heard already I missed the main thing. Because these conferences are the only possibilities for professionals to meet and see each other, because usually we're eaten up by our work. What am I talking about today is a topic our office is working on since it exists. We're doing all kinds of landscape architecture, especially. I've quit making real architecture, big architecture, with all the problems of installation and technical things, etc., and turned to landscape, which made it possible to work on very different projects. And what I'm talking about today, structure, infrastructure, is a topic we usually don't talk about. Our cities are growing. They're still growing, although Europe, in terms of population, is rather shrinking. And we need more and more land for our modern life. And the basis for this is infrastructure. All sorts of infrastructure, and usually as designers, we're not very much working with this. We leave this to engineers, but we cannot do that anymore. Infrastructure has become big, dominating. It occupies a lot of our land, and what we see here, our cities, I mean, this is a city in Asia, in Japan, they grow, but the basis of everything you don't see is infrastructure, and everything we don't like, we push at the edges of the cities. So what we don't like is, for example, industry. Industry, we don't want to see it, and when industry is part of the city, or it was part of the city in the 19th century, but since that we push it out. Another theme is waste. We push it out of the city, but since the cities are growing, they become the centers of our cities. We push out the motorways, and when we have motorways within the cities, they are usually of destructive effects on city life, urban life, and cause big problems. We sometimes may be able to overcome that with nice design and decoration, but or we place it underground, but usually the problem stays and will stay. It has the biggest effects on life. And the other one is energy. And Germany has now an agenda to change our energy system to alternative energy, thanks God, I would say. But it has big effects also on our life. It will have big effects on our life since we have to store energy. It's not only about production via solar cells, wind power, or other things. It is about storage of energy, short-time storage, and it makes life much more complicated. But what we're dreaming of still is, no effect anymore. Yeah, here we go. I hope I get it. It has become a bit slow. Yeah. What I want to talk about first, I'm going to talk about 4 projects we have been doing and we're working on at the moment. The first one is one which some of you might already know. It's the Landscape Park Duisburg North, which is in one of the most highly densely populated areas in Germany, the Ruhr area. Basically, there's a population like in Los Angeles, very big. Today it's a green city due to about 100 different projects which have been started by the IBA in the 90s. And unfortunately, the cities, or most of the cities, do not really continue that path of renewing the Ruhr area, but the existing projects have big efforts. And one of these projects was Duisburg North, a former big industrial complexes with blast furnaces and the coal industry and mining industry all introduced. And it must be known that industry creates a different type of cities. Basically here, the center of the cities was not a town hall, the center of the cities was the industry, and around it, the cities developed workers' cities with hardly any major urban infrastructure, but everything organized around it. And what we did when we came there was basically to find a new. This system doesn't work. Maybe you can help me. Yeah. So what we saw was an abandoned infrastructure, because what is industry other than infrastructure? Industry basically has a few production complexes, but most of it is how to bring material in and out, the waste in and out, the recycling and everything. And what you see namely is infrastructure for trains in this case and other transport vehicles. Usually we tend only to keep, if we do anything on history, we only keep the blast furnace as a big symbol, but mainly the blast furnace is just one little step in the production, and so we thought we should keep everything and do something with it. The first step was also we had to become a kind of engineer, somebody who knows how to construct all that stuff, to understand that landscape, because it couldn't be understood as landscape. And our aspect then was we have to take this Taurus by the horns and really do something with the structure and reinterpret the structure as a very specific kind of landscape. Because what it is nothing else but a big mountain. It's something you can climb on, something you can do with. And it's nothing else but something stunning, where around every corner you have a new perspective and see new things. So when we began to read the landscape, what we detected is a system of also water infrastructures, the train infrastructures, and the fields within very different functions within this kind of new grid. And we found out that this infrastructure, this old train infrastructure, is the best way to connect these areas also to the surrounding city. Basically, all the existing systems are continued inside and outside. And today, on the old train system, the big path system through the whole EVA area is organized. It is not a new system, it is an existing one transformed. And all our work then was about transforming these areas into landscapes, sometimes in a classical way, putting trees in the grid, in the industrial grid, in order to filter the effects of the huge machinery. Sometimes it was just trying to steer nature, invading some of the spots, which is maybe the romantic part of our work. Here it is just climbers growing over concrete structures. And finally, introducing public spaces into the existing fabric, having a background which couldn't be any more spectacular than this one. What I want to show you a little bit more in detail is the railway park and what is bound to it, and how we cross such a site, because that is the biggest problem. We have all these divisions, it's like a road system basically on the countryside, divisions within different areas, and how to create bigness couldn't be other than with the existing material. Introducing external design and stuff would have just made it more complex. And we were looking especially on existing elements, the steel of course, the ground systems, the coal. It is an artificial ground everywhere, but especially the vegetation, which is of a very specific beauty. Today this is common knowledge. We are not doing, if we reproduce that today, it is nothing new, but the beauty of this landscape is something which has to be detected, is very sustainable, works with the existing ground, and brings in efforts and things which you wouldn't see in a normal park. Basically also, we weren't the first one who detected it. The first ones detecting it were the old miners and the old workers of the area, and especially kids. In the rural area, which is basically which has a layover, a dense layover of industrial structures. Kids can only play in these kind of areas. And they were the ones telling us where the most interesting areas were. It was really funny. They were, even in winter, they were going in with inflatable systems on little lakes and paddling around and doing things. And that was inspiring for me because I was working that winter to do the, I'd say, the technical survey of that structure. Excuse me for the slow technical systems, but as you know, fortunately this technical system is very slow. The original idea was to take it all down, only leave some blast furnaces and make a modern park. In the competition we won, we proposed the opposite, to keep it and make it landscape, but also to introduce systems which can cope with that landscape. So like with this kind of salvia plants, like on big scales, or here you have pioneer trees, creating new squares in some areas, who can cope with the soil conditions and stay within a very specific aesthetic. Too fast. Another system we detected was the railway system, which was a kind of huge earthwork. So something which costs a lot of money when you make a new park. Sometimes it's the biggest portion of the money you have to place, was already existing. We just needed to look at it a bit more closely and detect what the beauty of that was. That was before we started construction. The rails were already sold out somewhere, maybe to the Far East and to Asia. And we found out the big bunkers, which were the end of that system. So here we had the railway system arriving on these tracks, highly interesting, effective. You look into these bunkers, which were 8 meters high, 8 meters large, 40 meters long. What could you do with that? Well, on the right side, you see one of the first glimpses of what we did with it. We introduced stunning playgrounds, places for art, ecological areas, and others. But I want to show you how we worked. The first thing we did was a kind of artistic survey in a certain sense. So we didn't measure the landscape, we tried to interpret all the functions and forms and which were existing. I mean, which park, modern park at that time, could offer a landscape like this? We tried to draw it then a bit more closely in order to find a way to understand its size and its construction, in order to be able to continue that. And finally, we made some of the systems. There were very simple connections, where formerly we had trains, but there were also more complicated ones where we continued and rebuilt a kind of structure in the sense of the old industrial system, in order to become one with the old colors of the industry, which is sometimes very beautiful, and reinterpreting the smaller bunkers on the side. These are quite small ones, where you can look in. Some of the bunkers were reinterpreted in a classic way, the little oases in that landscape. But usually we did this, like in cutting through 3 meters of concrete, creating these kind of stairs, a place where kids come from 30 kilometers away just to play here because it's a much more interesting playground than any new playground you could ever build, and it's just existing. The funny thing was, this is the end of the railway park here, and you could either walk back to the main track and then go down the stairs, or you take a slide which is taken by most of the visitors because it's such a nice thing. I've been walking there with an old historian. She was 80 years old, very energetic, from England, and she did that twice. She loved it so much. But what is more important, that's the funny part, but what is more important is that these areas can be also used not only for kids' plays, they are also used for BMX tournaments and other things. So they come down here with a bike, that's the special path, and here by the little stairs. So all this becomes one thing. Another bit has become a major center for the German Alpine Club, just reusing the existing concrete. The first ideas were that from these people, from the Alpine Club, was to transform it and put the usual forms of climbing patterns on it. But we could convince them of just climbing in the concrete, like in the rocks. And it's very attractive for the Alpine Club because the Alps are about like 450, 500 kilometers away. Very populated, works very nicely, and creates another side effect. it brings social control to these areas. The park is 230 hectares big. It's an extensive area. There are areas which are not very much maintained, and some are only used when there are big concerts. There was a concert of an indie band where there were 25,000 people. That was a bit too much. But usually there are groups playing for up to 5,000 people on these squares. We were using existing systems, so tunnels, etc., which were used by the workers in former times, I would like to say. And sometimes we were cutting through the concrete in order to get into the spaces, challenge them with landscape architecture, and also using them to store rainwater. Such an industrial area is a highly sealed compound. This has to stay very often due to the fact that we have contaminated soils, but also due to the fact that we don't know how to get the water into the ground, because could make it unstable in some areas. So basically what happened was that we are storing the water, making nice ponds in old industrial compounds, makes it almost romantic. Sometimes store the water within a big gas meter. This one here is a diving school today. And so this gas meter is a diving school, or just to make it possible that some ponds could be done. It's a completely sustainable system. There's no electrical pump system. Everything works on its own. It works very well just by reusing the industry and connecting several areas. All the water is collected in the riverbed of the old Emscher. The Emscher was the sewer from the Ruhr area. It's now in a tube, the sewer, so the two systems, rainwater and black water, is divided. And this is a clear water channel, which could be even used for swimming, and is driven by wind power. I mean, this is the only problem part, I would say, in the whole park, because it's a very nice system. It's the biggest wheel of this kind in the world, driving that. But unfortunately, the park belongs, or is, on the premises of 5 different communities. Some of you who have some experience in working with different clients in one project know what happens. They are fighting on who is taking care of the maintenance. And since that moment, and that's unfortunately some years, this wheel is not running anymore. But fortunately, its main effect is still working, and it has become a symbol of change in the Ruhr area, which you can see from the motorway and from far away. A symbol of change to something which coexists with still existing infrastructure, existing industry, but for the Ruhr area as one of the most greenest city areas or urban areas in the whole world. Oops. Hello. We have created some other spaces with existing materials, like with the steel stuff. So just reusing what is there, being creative with it, creating a square which serves today for many venues, but also sometimes just for the gathering of visitors and school classes, and which is used for different effects. There had been dances, there had been breakdance videos, video makers, and anything else. But what was important for us was always that every space within that compound becomes interesting for people to use, not only to visit, for landscape architecture students and professors and people like me, only touring the world to look what we can copy, but rather for the people who live around. So we were finding a place for the kids, which was away from the city, uncontrolled, but big enough so that they control themselves, where they have their parties, first love, first kiss, but especially what they want, skateboarding, etc. And the other places where people meet, so where there are not only climbers, but many tourists come as an attraction to look at the climbers and other things. We have events in that park. And what was a big problem in the beginning, the big halls existing, turned out to be one of its biggest assets. Empty halls where there were formerly all these machines, completely recycled or sold to, I don't know, Russia, China, but that's already long ago. That's a very old picture. The steam engine house, which was then within our project. an empty hall, a huge empty hall, and there it turned out that we should never ask the experts what to do, but you have to become creative. We basically didn't know immediately what to do with it, but our immediate strategy was, let's wait, and something will happen. The experts said, well, it's difficult to heat it, you don't know what to do it, we have to insulate the whole thing, we have to redo it, put all the new technical systems, it costs a fortune, take it down. It doesn't make any sense. And fortunately, the leader of the IBA Hampshire Park, Karl Ganser, who was the director for all these 100 projects, he said, no guys, let's wait. He was talking to all the politicians, the mayors, the communities, with his staff, his excellent staff he had with him. And so they waited just a few years, and then it became a big venue. So that they have art shows in there, they have fashion shows, they have the presentation of the new Volkswagen, they have the Social Democrats rallies in there, but also the Christian Democrats, so conservatives and progressive meet. They have big parties in there, and they have theatre pieces in there. We have the Triennale in the Ruhr area, which is a big classic modern music event, and it happens in there as well. So all this brings a lot of money, because all the other halls are used as well. We have also concerts within the existing compounds, just by adding a few little elements. And to maintain that park costs 4.5 million euros a year, which is almost nothing for 230 hectares. Usually it's much more. And only these venues bring in 1.5 million of rents. This goes a little bit up and down every year, and I don't know what the numbers are today because prices are rising. But it is an important part of modern parks works to make also a little bit of money. Our work always turns around one thing, which is turning around the perception of something. So turning its usual perception, oh, it's ugly, it's rusty, I don't like it, let's take it down, let's push it out of our sight. And I learned something at this project where I had a different opinion to my father, but it wasn't made because of us, it was because Karl Ganser wanted to have a light system for every intervention in the Ruhr to make it visible. Because the lighting in the Ruhr area is usually very technical. So he said, I want this, and Jonathan Park, who usually worked at that time for Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, etc., he was proposing a kind of system which is only gloomy. You know, light going up slightly, and at 12 o'clock it's out again. The park basically is dark. We have no light structure, but we have also no vandalism. We have no sexual offenses, we have nothing in there. Where there was before, only destruction, graffitis, and big problems. And this is something where we have to be optimistic. And this system basically changed the perception by all, let's say, the local people who were not involved in working on that compound, because they suddenly saw, oh, it has colors. That's like in TV, it must be important. It's very simple. We can ask ourselves how our perception works. And our perception, even those of highly academic professionals, is influenced by TV, by mass media, by internet. And so we have to think about how to make these areas interesting. Of course not with these kind of kitsch effects, I hope we can avoid that, or with only effects which have a short living time, but maybe with these things. I can only invite you to go there. Unfortunately, it's a lot of money, and since all the cities are bankrupt in the Ruhr area today, they have hardly any money to do it, but 2 times a week, so 2 evenings a week, the light system is still running. So what looks still here, like an industrial compound effect, has become a park. With all these systems, it transforms history into future. It makes industry part of our life, even if this industry, of course, is abandoned, it's not working anymore. And there are many, many more things in there to talk about, but I thought this gives you a glimpse of how we can integrate these elements and make our life, urban life, more interesting. How to deal with waste? I mean, of course, we cannot live with waste, really. That's a sanitarian problem. But what we know is that these waste compounds, and this is one of the biggest ones in, well, I would say almost Europe, and it's it is eaten up by the city. The city is growing around, and they were asking what to do with it, inviting artists at the very beginning, the real landfill, and besides that also our office to give advice on what to do with it. And then they started an international competition, which we fortunately won. Big honor for a German working in Israel, I would say. And we also won a second competition just afterwards to deal with the enormous landscape around the waste compound, because they have to make a floodplain in order to retain stormwater. Regularly, Tel Aviv is flooded in some areas in one time a year or two times a year, because they have hard rainfalls and the more and more sealed surface, and also the effect that we're very close to the West Bank and they don't have any means to stop the water from just running down and taking all the waste on the streets with it. Basically, this area is flooded and the city is flooded. So we're going to move here 7 million cubic meters of earth and create a big park around it. But I just wanted to talk about this one, the waste compound, what to do with that. And this is a photo from an airplane, because Ben Gurion Airport is just beside. And what we did basically is to reposition that thing. And in contrast to the other competitors, we said we save the form and do something with it. And that meant first we have to work with how such a mountain works, because a waste mountain, a landfill can shrink up down to 30%. No, down to 60%, sorry. So 30% less. So it's a moving landscape. It's something which transforms. And we try to develop systems who can cope with that. And the second is, a waste compound is like a pudding. It tends to go down like this, because it's more or less liquid. So our proposal was, and I think that's why we won, is we just put a berm at the bottom in order to keep it from doing that. And to make of this kind of security system the future landscape. It was, of course, in the competition, we had a simple drawing. It has become a bit more complex, a bit more higher, a bit more stronger, because the landfill turned out to be very big. And creating this berm around it, which was then occupied by agricultural patterns, it's another theme, to integrate agriculture, here mostly with fruit trees and olive trees around that. And to basically push the river, which was at the bottom of the hill, outside and make it a kind of free-flowing riverbed, naturally driven. You would walk over industrial bridges inspired by the industrial past, over a kind of green landscape where there's a lot of water, and you walk into a rather dry landscape, which is agricultural. And this is not a project, of course. This is because it's still under construction. And then, this is the latest plan we've been doing. Of course, it has been continued with colleagues in Israel. We're always working with locals when we realize projects far away. And we kept the outside of the hill as it is, in order to keep that fantastic picture and light it at night, do something with it. And on the top, we kept the big plateau in order to see the white city of Tel Aviv and the Mediterranean Sea, of course. Yeah. The ceiling is necessary, but it helps to collect all the rainwater and to keep it in little ditches within the ceiling in order to have more water for summer. Unfortunately, this is not enough to have enough water for the park, but it helps a lot to make it more sustainable and well working. The second system was an inside valley, which we kept, and we're working with movable systems. So there was no clear line, there's no straight line, there's no cool concrete wall. It is an old system which works perfectly in such system. It's the old drywall system, which you might know from Mediterranean countries a lot, which has to be piled up by hand and creates many little usable terraces. So the technical system is usable. That's very important. And creates a landscape which has thousands of paths and can move and works with recycling materials only. This is in our garden. We are testing some of our systems in our garden. This is not always funny, it's a lot of work, and now it's a lot of maintenance, because the garden is occupied by experiment. That's where we are. So within this central area, we're doing then the landscape where we put all the water we save. It's kind of a typical system in that region, adapted to the climate. So all the water from the top will be put in there, and hardly any water will come from outside into that kind of oasis. System is of course complex because we have to work with moving earth so that these drainage systems will also work in the future. And then finally, we have an underground storage system, like an oasis also. We're copying nature. So we're having a Gabion system on that kind of level, where we bring all the rainwater, keep it cool, so we don't have to recycle it. And we only need some pumps to move the water within the central system and use it for watering. Maybe one day, this is a very old picture, it might look like this. We don't know yet. I mean, this project is constantly adapted to political circumstances, let's take it that way. Israel has the problem that when they have a crisis, whether it's unfortunately military or financial or whatever, it has a direct effect in that small country on every project. And so the project is difficult, and we're starting rather with the big things, with things which can be showed in the press. And these two things, it's the path up, is sponsored by especially American experts, and it consists of a viewing platform, which will be put on a kind of access road in here, where you can look at the recycling systems. And this is the night image. So this will be the pathway. This is an animation. And you look down into a recycling park. And we said, no, we're not taking the recycling park out of sight, but we want that people see it. And it's one of the most visited recycling parks in, it's also an animation, be careful. This wall has just been constructed, and people can already look down, but the path is not yet built. And they look down onto systems like this. This is a recycling center in an old compound, where all the furniture and everything happening in there has been done with recycled materials, recycled wood, plastic, etc. And especially in Israel, recycling is extremely important because they don't have any resources other than their wonderful climate and the wonderful earth to create agricultural products. And recycling has become a big issue in that country. So classes, school classes are coming here, companies are sending their staff in order to be trained and informed about recycling. And the other point, which was sponsored then by those people, was a lookout point. Every time you do a park, think of that, you need a good lookout point. Because politicians want to have the inauguration of the first step in something like this. But also, I love it. You know, what is a park without these fantastic things? Think of the old parks like the Butte Chaumont in Paris, which is one of my favorites, where you have that little strange structure on top where you go in, you don't need it, you know. You could go on top of a mountain and look down and say, oh, beautiful it is, but people love to have something there. I love it too. So what we did is this, it has to be a moving structure. You cannot do something stable up there with a view over Tel Aviv. That was the animation. It's a bit bigger than that today. And from there you can see that construction has started. It's very slow. I think this project will last very long, much longer than Duisburg, much more than 10 years. And this is just during construction. I'll show you that picture because it was the only one I found. When we had the inauguration, there were so many people and we were not allowed to go here because the local engineers made a mistake in the calculations, and one of these was just falling down. Yeah, they change everything in Israel. It's quite funny to make it more efficient or cheaper. And we had big problems in now they reconstruct the whole foundation. It's not very funny. But it's a moving structure which moves with a mountain, and in this sense basically reflects the mountain's logic. A third thing is traffic. As designers, architects, we're very much working in making efficient systems where we save space and have use less square meters, make things efficient, bring things together. But the most terrifying system in our modern world is streets. We're covering, each month we're covering already 60 hectares only in Bavaria. I think it's even more than that. And you have here the effects of that, which is part of our modern life. We don't like it, we try to push that out, but it is part of our modern life, and of course these systems, which are very efficient, are not adaptable to urban areas. And I want to talk about a little project we did in Luxembourg on this Plateau de Kirchberg. This is a photo from the 50s, aerial photo. This is Luxembourg, so it's almost as big as the city. And the city decided to put here all the European functions as well as banks coming with it and other things. And they constructed a motorway, of course. It was very fashionable in the 50s. New bridge. It's the biggest bridge, I think, in the whole region, or in all Luxembourg. That wonderful motorway, which was ending here, like that, and around it with a junction, some buildings. That system was saturated after just a few decades. In the 80s, they didn't know how to extend it anymore. You have each junction is big like this. It just doesn't work. It's an enormous waste of space. So they were asking a team of Luxembourg architects, German architects, Christian Bauer and Jochen Jordan, and my father, Peter Latz, to propose a system how to cope with that. And they were proposing something very unexpected. They were proposing a boulevard. They said, take the motorway out. Just make it a boulevard. It has a much higher capacity for cars than a motorway, because the speed is much slower. It's beautiful. It's integrated into the urban fabric. And, even more important, you can redirect the city to the main artery. It's the origin of European culture. It's the street. So after some calculation, an American expert said, not possible, we have to double the motorway and have like elevated junctions, etc. The city decided not to do it, or the responsible people here. Unfortunately, we could change it. And that came along with a big master plan, where we had some park space, but I only want to talk about this. That's how it was looking. The motorway, very effective. Only 2 junctions, what means an enormous production of traffic, because you have to make big detours to get to your house, from the back of course, not from the front. And you're losing all that space. This is anti-urban waste. Well, you need maintenance for and you cannot use. I mean, there's some ecological programs for that, but I think that is rather ridiculous in modern times. We have to do something with it. And that was the result, 10 years later. The boulevard, which of course is huge, but it integrates not only the 2 lanes, it integrates spaces for a new tramway, a bus system, pedestrian areas, a contrallée, which is the parking along that way, so you can park along that. So here you see that section. It's a huge boulevard, but it's also a huge area. One of the first realizations, it's realized in steps, integrating also these very anti-urban structures, although nice architecture maybe, but very problematic to integrate. And this is the final piece we're just working on, the connection to the bridge and to Luxembourg city center on the other side. These are all European institutions, and it will be more and more dense, so there will be constructions all along this side and this side. And now I talk about how this looks. Well, there was a motorway once, you can now cross. Very simple. Very simple. It's interesting because if you ask engineers who are calculating that, they say it's not possible. But the thing is, when you start calculating things, the only thing you get is more traffic. It's in the logic of the system. I remember always Barcelona. I've been there when I was a young student, who turned over their whole city. It was a pure traffic system. You had no pedestrian areas. The planks, the metal planks at the edges of the motorways through the city, the Diagonal was a motorway, basically, were giving space of 1.50 meters for the pedestrian people. For bikes and anything else, all the rest was cars. And the system didn't work. It was horrible. And what is Barcelona today? And I have not calculated in the beginning. They're just that, push the car out, finish. It's one of the most beautiful cities in the world today, I would say. This, of course, you cannot compare with Mediterranean logic. This is mid-European logic of good engineering, but it works, and people are crossing. And the buildings are reorientating, and they go to the central artery of a city. What we had before wasn't a city, it was a traffic system. And the most stunning thing was the reorientation of the big magazines, of the superstores. They were laughing at us and they were saying it never works, and constructed the building in a way that you were still going to the main parking on the backside and enter the building from the backside. What happened was They changed their face. Now they are eating along what was formerly a motorway. This is a very old picture. I don't have an actual one, unfortunately. I think it's now 8 years old. And that's why this looks like a backside of a building. Well, it's no problem when at least the functions are in the right spot. We're working on the last bits here, the huge space. And I just want to talk briefly about this system, which is the way how to integrate such a big infrastructure into green systems. So when you look into something, usually they don't have any money for that, but already in classic landscape architecture we can learn so many things. Like when you see a landscape and Skell or Linné was putting a little temple, the whole landscape became a park. You know this, you know, it's Muska, it's all these famous guys, it's Capability Brown and many other designers, and what we did is something which is more or less similar, create a window. Fortunately, they bought into it, and this is the motorway plan, and we proposed two structures. One which looks into the landscape. Now this is a kind of slope down into that landscape, which is more or less artificial, but is green. And one from the park system, which looks into the city. And the effect was, I mean, we proposed long, very long structures with big walls. So a big intervention which can cope with the power of traffic. Because traffic is a very powerful system. It's not, you know, if you discuss it that way, you can maybe cope with it. If you say it's noise, it's horrible, it's dust, it's emissions, you will never be able to work with it. You have to leave it to engineers and specialists. But if you take it from a landscape architectural point of view, you can have interventions like this. This is construction, this is not an intervention. So behind it is a green system, and we're connecting the street directly to the green system. It's a very classic system. And you're connecting directly and make it interesting to walk into that landscape. So when you drive here, you're not having a decorating green buffer zone, you're having the park right next to the street, and that's an open system. All the other systems, I think, are not. You connect it to the beauty of landscape, which happens sometimes right beside streets. You have the view back into that system. I mean, I wouldn't say this is beautiful, but it works. We have to find ways how to integrate big streets into our cities. We have no other chance. If not, we neglect a very important part of what could be work for landscape architects in the future. So this is the boulevard. You cross here, you walk down, and you see also the green systems, and which you wouldn't see if you drive along. But because you have such a symbolic nature, you might see it, and then you walk down. This is just a year after construction. There's already many things happening, many more architecture to be created. I hope it will be a little bit different to this one here. But yeah, and also connecting underground systems. I mean, this is something we're doing also in recent times, trying to find static systems for crossing. That's nothing new. But what is important is that not the traffic system is dominating the area. It's the cultural system and our perception which is dominating the car system. So the last topic I want to talk about is energy. I've been talking to you about the problem of the change of energy system in Germany, and the biggest problem is that we have these kind of peaks of production of energy, which is more and more happening due to nature, to natural processes, to wind and to sun. And we have the problem of peaks of use. And in order to buffer that system in a kind of 2 to 3 day distance, we need different storage systems. And the most effective storage system is so-called pumped storage plants, where basically water is pumped up when there's a lot of energy, when the wind turbines run, or at nighttime when you need less energy, so energy is cheaper. So you pump water up somewhere, as high up as possible. And when you need the energy, you just let it flow down, recreate the energy, and bring it to the places where you need. It's a huge system. The higher this distance, so the best is like 800 meters to 1 kilometer, the better. And you can imagine what that means. This is enormous. This is millions of cubic meters of stone. And this can be a lake or a river, and this can be a lake or a river. There are systems like that existing since 150 years. The biggest one, I think, is in Brazil, where a friend of mine is working on with his students. And but I'm talking about a system in Germany, and you have these wonderful canals where there are thousands of cubic meters of water running through in just a few seconds. They're beautiful, but unfortunately we will not see that anymore. But what we can see is these turbines, where you always need two because one could break, blah, 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 etc. But what are the effects? I mean, these systems are big. They're really big. And of course, most of the people who live around an area where you want to construct something like that are against it. Because everybody wants a change of energy system. Everybody wants that we're not having any atomic, industrial or coal industrial energy production anymore, but nobody wants it in its backyards. The NIMBYism, you know that perfectly. But it has to happen somewhere. Unfortunately now, they are doing it in Germany, and that's what will happen. A lake. Well, you would say, what's wrong with the lake? Wonderful. But unfortunately, it will never look like this. That's an animation the company was doing, which is showing basically the highest level of water which will ever arise, but this only happens once every 3 years. Usually, it looks like this. Yes, beautiful. And you're not really allowed to use it. You cannot swim there, you cannot fish there. There are some fish, not much because of the turbines. You know, fish meat. It looks like this. Now what to do with that? Damn it. You can walk around it and make it beautiful, but what can we do? So they were asking different landscape architects to make a proposal, and we have won that competition because we were not dealing with nature and covering with plants and everything, but we're doing the same things like the others, the path system, connecting existing lakes, artificial lakes, and making use of a kind of corridor where you can look at it. But is that all? So we said the most important thing of the people is curiosity. People love to look at construction sites. And I don't know why we do not use that a little bit more in our life. This construction site will last for 7 years. It takes 7 years to dig all the material out, to construct stuff, etc. So in 7 years you have a horrible situation for all the adjacent communities, because you have a lot of dust, you have all the lorries, you have a lot of noise. But if you make it something interesting, it could be a venue where people go, where classes go, where buses tour, and look at it, like in Uriah maybe. And we proposed the first very simple system, made some lookout points. Well, it's so far so classic, nothing special, but if you have nice lookout points, more people are coming than if you just have a place where you have a bench to sit. So we will put some of these around the future lake. The second is simulation. Simulation is to show what you cannot see, and what you won't see is water at its highest level. So we were proposing a visitor center which is not a little cabin somewhere where you sit and look into that landscape, but something which is right at the edge. It's not yet discussed to the end because the engineers, because of security and surveillance, etc., want it somewhere out there, but I think we will convince them. And we put it into a place basically where people stand is the level of the water which you will never see. So, and having something inside. And this could be constructed at the very beginning, and from there you look also into the construction site. So far, so classic maybe. Then what to do with the rubble? There will be millions of cubic meters of stone. And most of it will be used to construct the dam, which is a huge, massive system. It's not reinforced concrete systems, it's concrete just rammed, like at Roman times. And what to do with the rubble? We proposed in the folds, in between the dam and the existing landscape, we create something for tourists, which could look like this. These are tourist attractions somewhere in Germany. And we hope that with the rubble extracted, we can do something similar for people to go through. That might be more interesting than to walk through the forest. And this would be in the fold, and would create a very specific possibility to climb up these 40 meters to the top of the construction. The second one is the front piece of the dam, which will be mostly covered with green space, and to make it something beautiful, and to work with maintenance system, and just give them a kind of system of maintenance to make it beautiful. Well, these systems are known. So I come to the most important bit. It's the future industrial part. It's the dam, which is 600 meters long and only concrete, 20 meters high. It will look out 20 meters over the ground. And of course, all the adjacent, this is the sports grounds of the adjacent community, they are afraid of that. And they fear that everything they're going to see is a 600 meter long concrete wall, and they don't know what to do with it. Horrible. And the communities here are sometimes very nice, good for tourists. So what is this? An obstacle. So we propose to do something with it. You need to use these structures. You need to climb on it, do something, make it maybe more interesting. We were thinking of 19th century architecture with all these back and forth drops, which weathers very nicely because of the dirt going on it. So we were transforming the surface of that structure. So there will be darker points and lighter points. And then maybe this can become something like a mountain again, where you can climb. Maybe you can create folds. You can create this. See the person here? This is 20 meters of concrete. The biggest climbing area in Europe would be possible. This, unfortunately, is the old construction. They have changed again. It's a bit flatter, so we have to make that more dramatic. But we can use that. And we propose a little square in front of that 20-meter structure so that you can climb here. But this is also interesting to walk here because it's more beautiful. So it could look like this, maybe. Maybe. You never know how money flows, also in Germany. So, but part of that, I guess, will happen and will become a venue, an attraction. And that's how you would look at it from the city, or from the community. It's a small community. So it's not a kind of long wall anymore. It's a structure. It's a rock. It's a cliff. And it blends partly, at least, into the size, into the grain of the adjacent landscapes. That's what we're hoping very much. We got a lot of credits for that from the communities. It's still undercover because resistance against the whole system of the local ecologists is very high. They prefer atomic energy instead of doing something logical. But it is difficult, I must say. So I have to be very calm with that, not to share. The last system is the water. The water is warm. Because of the fact that it goes through the mountains, it's not going up and down with the temperature. It has sometimes up to 30 degrees. This is warmer than a swimming pool. So, especially in winter, it will create fog. I think that's dramatic and certainly interesting. This is a natural system, and that's how it will look like. And you know the effect of rays of light. So we want to use something, again, to make what will never happen visible, so the highest level of water could be visible also at night. Maybe that's an extra attraction. And finally, also, what happens to the water, which is constantly going up and down, 40 centimeters in an hour. It can go down and up. The water in there is only enough to deliver enough energy, I think, for a few megawatts for 3 days. So this is really only to buffer the peaks of energy, heat, and supply. And so it will constantly go up and down. And what happens is, and we propose then a system which reveals itself when the water goes down and up, like a miniature of the big dam. A landscape evolves. A technical element becomes a landscape, but just introducing little elements, little dams going up and down, floated again, then going down again, keeping some fish in there, showing something you want to look at, and makes it maybe more interesting to walk around that huge crater. And even less, and then up again. I always tend to put myself into the position of a kid who walks an area and wants to see something. And I remember when I was climbing old ruins, medieval ruins, to see, oh, the knight has been there, and taking his mistress out, coming back from the battle. And here it is a little bit, what's the landscape? What's happening there? Who did that? Who lives there? Kids love that. And I hope I could see that one day, and these walls would be made in the same way, like the big walls, the big dam, concrete structure. So they duplicate something and put it at a human scale. Another possibility we were adding then was something you could see more. We called it the nixis tubs. So something, just putting some holes into the rocks which are around at this one, at this basin. And maybe we can think about some water in there. We think, well, who is there? Whose bathtub is that? I mean, what's happening? Who's living there? I mean, they will be flooded sometimes, they will go up sometimes. But that might make that whole landscape more interesting, to walk around, to look at it, see something like a spectacle. It's an inverted water system in a certain way. So hopefully, in 7 years, I can show you the realization of some of these elements. And until then, I hope that I have the chance to come to Tallinn again. But that's about transforming such landscapes and make it maybe something we can accept in our urban environment. Thank you very much.